Hello, and welcome to Generation AI, the podcast where we demystify artificial intelligence in the world of higher education. I'm your host, Ardis Kadiu, and joining with me today is my co-host, Dr. JC Bonilla. Hey, JC. I wanted to add a couple of kind of adjectives in there.
I saw your body language getting there, getting ready to say something awesome, and it just dropped, in JC. Well, I'm doing good, Ardis. How you doing? 2 weeks in a new gig and I haven't gotten fired, so I'm doing good.
I know. You're surviving. How's your boss?
Asshole, but it's fine. I'm surviving, everybody.
Hey.
I'm still here. As you know, Ardis and I are working back together. Art is becoming my big boss, and it's always fun to see him in his element, no pun intended. And good, good solid 2 weeks. My friend, you've built an awesome company. So fun to see the unpacking and the meaningful things. So all of you Element friends listening to our voices, I'm very impressed with what you've done. And thank you for the awesome welcome to the Element family. JC the Boomerang.
That's right, JC the Boomerang. Maybe I should do the intro one more time. My awesome co-host, the Boomerang JC Bonilla, everybody.
The Boomerang JC. Ardis, how's your health?
I've been feeling a little bit under the weather. It's like walking pneumonia. I think that's what I got diagnosed with. So hopefully my voice is a little bit better this time around.
Everybody, we've been talking in this podcast about all this mileage that he is, packing and how his family is going to benefit from this. But Ardis broke. Think about I don't know, how many airports have you seen in the past month? 82?
I don't know, man. I usually consider myself pretty resilient to sickness. So
we've seen you everywhere. So yeah, sometimes the body sends us a signal, which is basically slow down. So thank God for science and meds.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm on the mend. I will be missing AMA, which is happening right now, and the Element team is there. So if you're still at AMA, please stop by and say hi to them. We're throwing an awesome, probably by the time this comes out, we threw an awesome party Sunday night at, and of course, this is in Vegas at Caesar's Palace, the real Caesar's Palace.
A lot of minds being challenged, a lot of AI conversations, and a lot of livers also being treated as we speak. Because there's a lot of drinking that takes place in those things. So, Ardis, you and I spoke about what this episode should be all about, and we want to be sensitive, contemporary, and also walk a really fine line of elections post-analysis, obviously under the lens of higher education and all things AI. Maybe what we should start with is, what is this podcast not about today, right? Because although we're going to be using the lens of elections, this is not about, we're not a political commentary type of podcast. So, Ardis, from your point of view, what is this not about as we unpack election talks?
Yeah, certainly this is not about, certain political views or one party or another, or about individuals, So this is, except for Elon, right? So I'm gonna just leave that aside. But it is not about political views. So we're going to talk today about kind of, maybe a little bit of what we think between JC and I, what we think the impact can be of this new administration, and from everything that we've absorbed and we know today. And the news, what we think, how that's going to impact kind of the adoption of AI or the acceleration of AI, and then also, probably some of the education and how we think about that in the education space. And then the last topic that we're going to talk about, which is very, very fresh, it's a really, really interesting one, and it goes back to kind of companies in the age of AI and education. We're going to talk about, there's an article today in the Wall Street Journal on Chegg. So for those of you who don't know Chegg, so the name of the article is How ChatGPT Brought Down an Online Education Giant. So we're going to talk about all of those different topics and try to have an episode where it's going to be a lot of opinion for sure, but hopefully we'll give you some kind of a peek in how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, and everybody, this is a reaction to a new government. It's going to start marching and bringing a view in January 6th, right?
20th.
Next year. 20th. I'm Anyway, next year. And this is not about whether it's the right government or the right government, how I think and how I feel about this government. This is all about understanding that the agendas and the policies that the government will institute, how do they affect all things AI and the repercussions that we could see. This has the good and the bad towards our favorite topic, all things higher education. So, Ardis, probably the best way to start, in my opinion, right? There's a current legal construct, right, of AI that the Biden administration turns out, and it's very common for administrations to look back retrospectively at prior administration and revoke, remove, and kind of start from scratch. So whether that policy is a good one and whether we like the regulatory things that it does on all things AI, this Biden AI agenda probably has its days counted. So thoughts on that, Ardis?
Yeah, I think, kind of a victory here for the Republicans or the GOP means that it's expected to roll back the existing AI regulations and kind of have a more hands-off approach to governance around AI. And we are seeing this already, or this is something that, as you're bringing in folks like Elon and so on and so forth, that's the hands-off, approach. Even though Elon was for AI regulation, there's going to be a healthy tension there for sure. But certainly that executive order, EO, will be kind of rolled back, and everybody, that's what they think about. So if you don't remember what that executive order was, it was around regulating how big these models can be before they get announced to the government, who's responsible for the downstream effects of those models and the safety and the training on them, and how much compute you can use to kind of train them, and so on and so forth. So a lot of those regulations will be rolled back.
Yeah, there's 5 components: safety and effective systems, algorithm discrimination, data privacy, notice and explanation, and human altercations, considerations, and fallback. So our first forecast predictor here is this probably moves away and a replacement or a different viewpoint will be unpacked. Let's talk about that. And you said regulation is going to be important. I think and that's the second derivative of this. We know a Republican government has a different approach to regulation of big tech.
Yep.
The Biden administration, a bit more heavy-handed. And that's the other manifestation that I'm actually excited about. Mergers and acquisitions, specifically big guys buying small guys, big no. We saw Microsoft doing very clever things so that they can have this super gigantic AI portfolio, right? So from acquisitions of companies and buying the companies so you can get the people to weird, in partnerships and infusion of cash and funding, like OpenAI, multiple things. With the new administration, we should probably see that it's easier for a giant to be saying, hey, I want to buy you because I love your tech and now you're part of, AWS, Google, Meta, and things like that, right? Thoughts on merger acquisitions, big guy taking over, exciting new tech, emerging new tech?
Yeah, I mean, the Federal Trade Commission, like the FTC, they've been really anti-mergers and acquisitions. Lina Khan, which is the person in charge there,
regulator.
The regulator, they've been really against it, and they've blocked quite a few of those, specifically on the pharma side. But even on the big tech side, that's not there. And one of the things that's really important for the ecosystems is how these companies and the VCs and the investors that are investing in these companies, they can't make their money back unless these companies are bought out by bigger companies or they go public. So there's very, very few companies that have gone public, and there's not a lot of liquidity coming back. They can invest in more. Obviously, there's a lot of money out there, but the founders or the people who are part of these companies or those employees or that leadership team and so on and so forth, what we usually see in an ecosystem where you have a lot of mergers and acquisitions is that there's money now going into these founders and there's money going into employees and so on and so forth. And what that leads to is a secondary effect where those founders and those employees now go on to form new companies and the startups and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the effect of that, that money or that liquidity coming back. So My hope is that that will kind of start happening, and as that happens, the obvious place where that those startups and that huge emergence of these companies can come into without as much regulation. So you take both of those, right? So you take the ability to have more, and then you take the regulation, some of the regulation away, and make it easier. Then AI is the natural place or the natural way to start thinking about these companies. So they're going to be AI first companies and solving specific problems in all kinds of industries. But education is another, it's one that's, at Element, we're trying to disrupt it by, kind of building these AI first engagement platforms, a system of record. But we're going to see that happening in a more accelerated way in a lot of different places as well.
So I'm going to play back what you said because I think it's on the money. And what we expect with the release of AMAs, right, or basically the deregulation of AMAs, there's a really interesting first derivative of, the company gets acquired. So second derivative is that the people who got acquired benefit from that trade, and probably naturally they're starting new businesses. And what we also think is that if there's a new business or you're going to start a new startup, chances are that is either AI adjacent or AI first type of company. So from an AI point of view, we are foreseeing a very bull market, if you will, for anything's AI and innovation in AI, if you will. Adjacent to AI, also it's important to remember that this administration, it's friendlier towards Bitcoin, blockchain, all that type of machinery. And it'll be interesting to see if there is a Bitcoin, blockchain, AI phase emerging. Ardis, how do you feel about literally the startup world, right? So this is not big money starting a company, but the company is started by that student that goes into a Y Combinator type of program. How does this administration impact benefits, or how should we be thinking about the artists of the world 20 years ago, right? So I have this passion, I have these ideas, and then here I go creating a company, but literally it's just me and maybe in my dorm room. So how do I think about that small version of a startup?
There's a lot more opportunities, right? So where there's a reward on the other side, there is a lot of people who are willing to take that risk and get there. Now, what we can see is kind of I would say, an acceleration of that. But, well, let me take a step back. What we have today, JC, with AI is the ability for one entrepreneur or two entrepreneurs to make a much bigger impact and to build a company that is much bigger without needing a lot more capital and a lot bigger investment, because AI can be an accelerator and can be a tool that you can do a lot more with. So we're probably going to see the beginnings of, if you remember, we talked before where Sam Altman said AI will be able to have, we're going to have a 10-person company, $1 billion unicorn or $1 billion 10-person company. So we're going to be starting to see that happening over the next couple of years. So that entrepreneur will be able to do a lot more with a lot less. So I believe that's a huge potential here for a lot of entrepreneurs to actually start new ventures, because they can do a lot more. They can get a lot faster. They don't have to have, incredible amount of capital to actually go ahead and build a product, right? You can build those a lot faster, and you can get more product market fit a lot faster, or you can test things a lot faster, so to speak.
Yeah. So, and that's an interesting point, because I think what I'm hearing you say is maybe this is administration neutral or agnostic. The new companies that emerge from this phase of AI could look so different that the traditional entrepreneurship route that creates a very wealthy company with hundreds of people, it will be just one or two founders, because a tech stack that is AI native or AI first could really accomplish as much as 100 people, right? So, and that's really interesting to see how this government starts thinking about that, if anything, in allowing for this ecosystem to flourish, or basically grow organically. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, when you look at education, a lot of folks are scared because of there's a lot of chatter on, hey, we're going to remove or we're going to dissolve the Department of Education, right? Or we're going to shrink it down or reform it and so on and so forth. So that's a fear that happens. I don't think that's going to happen. That's going to be almost impossible to accomplish. But what you're going to see is a need for efficiency in a lot of these different areas. And Department of Education is going to be one of those. How can you fuck up the FAFSA, this big application, and we talked about it, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars going into the development of this product, and it was still not tested, and just the incompetence of like rolling out a product that affected so many different people, and the efficiency was very, very, very bad. So what we're probably going to see is going to be a kind of a driver towards efficiency. So you're not going to have as big, but the impact can potentially be really, really important. So I think that's gonna be very helpful for sure.
This is a good segue on something that I'd love for you to read and love to hear your thoughts. I don't know what you think about this efficiency angle that it seems that it's coming our way. So let me just set the stage here. This election, as it relates to AI, was not the election that we thought it would be as civic as we thought of AI as, all these campaigns of disinformation and like these crazy things that we thought we're going to see. I don't know, Biden in a bikini dancing with Trump with a monkey on his shoulders and all of a sudden like saying different crazy things. We thought this election was going to be dominated by fakes and deep fakes, right. And it was not. This election, however, was the election of what we call the podcasts, candidates going into mediums like yours and I to basically diffuse the message. The infamous 3-hour interview with Trump and, oh my gosh, Austin
Rogan.
Rogan, of course, yep. Rogan. Kamala starting with, basically appealing to certain markets, and both Kamala and Trump doing that. So the election of the podcast. But the other thing that this election was an Elon election, right? His involvement in the Trump campaign and his approach showcased there. Why? So this is why I want to connect it. As I said, it was going to take me time to set up. Why? Because there's this assumption that his view of efficiency, it's going to hit the government, and then we may be seeing that. So I know that you are a big fan of what he does, and you've sometimes a student of some of his approaches. What do you think is going to happen here? A quest for efficiency. AI and efficiency are always in the same sentence for you and I. So now that you put a influence figure that has crushed efficiency for multiple ways, what do you think happens? And how do we benefit or not from that in our world of AI and all things higher ed?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack in there. So this idea of efficiency, look, it would be very delusional to think that Elon is going to come into the government and actually make the impact that
Minister of Efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. So it's gonna take a while, right? And once it takes a while to unravel the bureaucracy and all of the different systems. So everything is going to work against you.
So I should not expect a sink coming into the Department of Budget, or what's it called? OPTS?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that might be, I was going to say there is the reality, and then there is the signaling, and there is also there's a lot of people that are focused on that they want to do the right thing and their views and how they want to work it, but they haven't been given the opportunity to do that. So this perhaps allows folks who are already part of the system to actually contribute towards a more efficient government, but without having to be, we work in academia, right? In academia, there's just so much bureaucracy when you start thinking about budgets. Think about the budget. Like, let's take that, for example. Both you and I managed budgets. You had a much bigger budget than I did, of course. But so what did you do when you had budget left? Like, you didn't go and say, hey, CFO, here is an extra, $500,000
There's zero incentives to have money left.
Correct.
So in today's budgeting area, right? So what happens when you have money left is that you got to play a corporate political game, and there's multiple ways that gets manifested. That's a whole different podcast. But yeah, zero incentives to leave money to in the table. Zero.
Exactly. So it's the same thing that we can, it happens in universities. Like, why wouldn't you operate from an efficiency or zero-based budget or things like that? Like, why wouldn't you operate from, I need some certain outcomes, and then we drive funding. But when you're allocating money across and you're peanut butter spreading it everywhere, then everybody's incentive, it's localized, and meaning that they care about their own little world and how to make that world and gain more influence and gain more influence. So it's going to be really interesting. I don't think it's going to be very difficult for Elon to come in and actually unravel that. But maybe what's going to happen is he's going to focus on one or two departments. If we can get that, maybe some of the companies, we can accelerate the adoption of kind of this innovative new companies actually working with government to accelerate things. So like, things like we don't have things like Boeing, for example, being entrenched and the government spending billions and billions of dollars and stranding our astronauts. It's like, how did we get to that point where the amount of money that we're spending with Boeing or some of the incumbents, like the really large organizations, like we can't move away from those. And then you almost have to be really big in order to bureaucratic in order to fit into that system. So hopefully what we'll see is an opportunity for the smaller guys or for the more efficient guys to play in that playground and open the door, and that will filter down then to some of the efficiencies. But you can't just go in and cut stuff out, but you can make regulation to allow, the market to come in and smaller companies to play in the playground.
But look at this logic model, and it'll be very interesting for us to, go at it for like a few more minutes, because if you were to connect the dots, all things being AI, it's a really interesting conversation. So dot number one, this incoming government, it's, not big government. Republicans like to be basically more lean, relatively more lean as it relates to administration, right?
Right.
Dot number two, Elon supposed to have an efficiency angle towards what he's done before. We've seen his approach to verticalization. We've seen how he's done really well through space exploration and like figuring that out, and like the quest for efficiency and reusable rockets. We'd see him fired half of the staff at X, right? And then the product still goes on, right? And so on and so forth. Exhibit number three, all things AI are the quest for efficiency. Right, so I think that it's a really interesting thing that if you were to connect the dots, we're maybe saying that this administration may be deploying more AI because the natural way to achieve smaller government, efficiency, and then when someone like Elon, maybe we suppose that it's going to be around, it will be a natural recommendation. So for me, it's an interesting logic model, and maybe it does happen. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's one component that goes hand in hand with what I was just saying. Like, hey, this is very innovative companies that are springing up right now. It's like, how do they work with government, and how do they work to make these systems more efficient and to kind of leapfrog? So we're using AI to accelerate those things. But the government is not building that stuff internally, right? That's what we like. They have to work with companies and industry to bring that stuff in. And the companies that are actually doing that work are the ones that are newer and they don't have the foothold in government. So what this allows then is to bring that technology in. One way that we saw it is, perhaps Meta has open sourced Llama, and there's news that China has been using Llama without obviously the permission, Llama 3 without permission for military uses, and they're adopting it and they're using it for that. Obviously, that's not allowed. However, so now Meta has opened up their licensing, so it can be used for government use and military use and so on and so forth. So you're going to see a lot more of that, where, something being used for military use or for government use, and the larger organizations like Google and employees who are in those organizations, if you saw I don't know if it was 80 years ago in 2016 and so on and so forth, everything that was, oh, we're going to collaborate with the military, we're going to collaborate with the government. Everybody, there was this reaction internally on this large organizations, on the employees themselves, that it's like they start quitting or kind of this backflash. We're not going to see it. We're not seeing that now. And that's probably going to be one of the ways that we're going to benefit from that, or at least the government and this new administration is going to benefit from it.
It'd be very interesting to play this out to your point about the effects of the approach that this administration has on America first and our rivals, economic rivals. So with the Biden and the prior administration, we saw the semiconductors bill, right? One of the biggest ingredients for AI and the benefits that we have today through AI, it's on compute, right? And the power, right? And NVIDIA and many of those right now are trying to figure out how do they do what they do without China, right? I don't know how it will manifest itself, but to your point about China benefiting from R&D that comes from here that right now is actually free because it's open sourced, it'd be very interesting. Does that mean tariffs? Does that mean barriers? Does that mean interesting localization? Or no, you cannot extend this technology over there? I don't know. But there's a really interesting conversation about what does it mean to apply a US first agenda to AI, the LLMs, the software, as we've seen it on the semiconductors today. Competitive advantage is real, and right now through LLMs, there's a gigantic competitive advantage and commercialization behind it. Thoughts?
No, I think there's going to be even more of an incentive to accelerate these large labs that are building frontier models, and the regulations moving out of the way, plus the ability for energy to now, tap into other sources of energy that were kind of taboo or restricted before. So we don't have to, we can still use natural gas and drilling and on oil and all that stuff. So I don't think those are going to be the barriers going forward, at least for the next 4 years. And of course, we'll start building more of nuclear and so on and so forth. So the energy unlock, or the barrier on the energy side, I would say kind of removes the acceleration for the frontier labs to build better and better and bigger data centers and models.
Yeah. And Ardis, I think maybe is a good segue to the story that you were commenting at the beginning, because what we are saying, in a way, if you get the spirit of the conversation, we think that this administration will be AI friendly. And the stories that we see today on the news will become a reality, right? And then this is kind of connecting dots. A small startup in a garage type of place becomes a $2 billion companies overnight with 2-3 professionals, and they would displace an incumbent that has maybe 5x a penetration on the market or capitalization, right? So many more stories probably will come. So can we unpack this Chegg story and how ChatGPT basically displaces an organization that has been a stable for educational discovery and supporting teens for years?
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Chegg started, it's a study guide repository, right? And it started really early on, I believe
like 15 years ago or so?
Right, exactly. Where it was, students sharing study guides, and then it became a textbook sharing site, and then eventually became a place where you can go into and pay a subscription and get answers to textbook problems, right? So you have a textbook, that being math or whatever it was, right? So all of these quizzes and answers in those textbooks that usually when we were in college, we got those from other people who were ahead of us. Cliff Notes. Well, yeah, exactly. But if they're technical stuff, right? If it's technical, like we usually got it from you knew somebody who took the class before. Exactly.
I never got a midterm exam on differential equations from anybody that took it the prior year. I never got that.
That's really interesting. So Chegg became a really popular site, and they went public.
By the way, 2006, that's when they were founded, 2006.
Exactly, exactly. So their model was, 1995 a month for these pre-written answers to textbooks and questions. So from 2021 to today, he has lost 99% of the value. The stock has lost 99% of the value. So it's erased 14.5 billion in market value, which is incredible.
They disappeared.
Exactly.
By the way, and this is a ramp up. They kind of go public. Let me see this. 2006, and it's basically in 2013 they go public, right? So this is the past 11 years, right? Or in this case, 10 years. It was that ramp up, and literally, basically free fall thereafter, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So the idea here is that, well, not the idea, but once ChatGPT got introduced and they saw a decline in users using their site, and they did not adopt fast enough, right? One of the things that they mention from internal, the article mentions, is people internally were asking the company for resources to build AI and to test and to deploy AI systems internally, and they weren't given enough resources or resources at all. They were denied resources. So what that means to me is that the leadership had no idea that this AI thing was going to be that impactful or that big, and kind of what the outcome of that was for their business. So in 2023, the CEO of Chegg was on stage at ASU GSV and released what they called Checkmate, which was a chatbot companion to answer questions. It wasn't very good. The adoption was still low. People internally said it was just really, really bad, and like didn't was not kind of the answer to what they were looking for. The market didn't move, so they kept on losing market share, They've done a lot of work to kind of infuse AI throughout their products and to kind of help build answers. Now, when you get an answer, somebody pays $20, but they get an answer, and it's sometimes it's AI generated. However, they can go to ChatGPT and get a better answer for that.
And Ardis, just to unpack what better means, the personalization, the speed, and the cost. Literally, with these free versions of ChatGPT, you don't pay anything. You prompt, and as your prompt in your style, you get a refinement of it, and just basically in the time that it takes place. It's incredible. Anyway, keep on going.
So the idea here was that these guys were going to build a ChatGPT with all of their answers. It didn't quite work out that way. They went ahead and hired a startup called Scale AI that would create a lot of different AI systems for different academic disciplines. However, the evolution of the AI models like ChatGPT and GPT-4 and so on and so forth, they just became really, really powerful. And then the users were just getting trained to go to those different sources rather than Chegg. And the stock has kind of tumbled ever since, losing a lot of their money. There was an interesting quote. It's like from somebody. He said, "I felt scammed because there was an answer that he got, and it said AI generated, and he got actually a better answer." With some of the other models like the free ChatGPT or even the Anthropic one. So what do you take from this, JC? I mean, I give you a lot of the kind of the details of the company and like how AI basically erased $15 billion of market value from a company that's been around for a decade plus, very instrumental to higher education or education in general. But now we have a very, very different behavior. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, look, it's nothing revolutionary, right? There is a cycle of innovation and technology displacement that is very natural. An incumbent sees a competitor either with traditional differentiation or better cost, or in this case, a different experience, and literally they eat their lunch. We've been seeing this for the past 100 years, so I'm not surprised. The part that is different, though, is that if I always like the Marriott story, like, J.W. Marriott made his money by looking at a competitor and like literally launching the same thing and doing it faster, better. But what is not told and is different today is that Marriott, in this case, made his money making sodas. So he knew that business, and he was a supply chain expert and like all this type of things. So there was a level of expertise that is needed for you to displace the incumbent. So if I came in like us, right, we're building this super exciting student platform, but at the core, we're technologists, we're educators, so we have this expertise. What AI is doing is that it could displace the most random organizations without having a one-to-one connection or trace back to, oh, we come from the same sector. You know what I mean? ChatGPT was not meant to displace homework, educational providers. No, right? And also, like, it took on $1 billion company. So that's what I take. Sure, it's doing what technology displacement has been doing it, and it's doing at in a normal style without having the SMEs and the experts that basically geek out that sector they want to replace, and doing it in a way is unintentional and way too many side effects that taking place. That for me is different and exciting, right? Because us building it, we're the displacers as opposed to the ones that are going to be displaced. So for me, that's exciting and very, very promising.
Yeah. But I also see this as essentially the value of these companies that are basically generating content. They're a system of content or giving answers or producing answers. Like this is, these systems are there's not a lot of proprietary stuff that's underneath there, right? So these models get better and better at reasoning and all these things. So the gold value is in the data. It's in the user data, the behavior, like the system being the system of record, like all these things. And everything else on the content side, we're seeing that as a layer that's going to be disrupted tremendously. Think about like a learning management system, an LMS, right? And I just saw yesterday a demo from a startup called Pete Learning, and they focus on corporate education. And they loaded in a very heavy manual, like a manual from, I forget, like a security manual that, or somebody needed to go through, and with very little prompting, it essentially built 3-4 different module outline. It actually built the learning objectives. It built everything from that one manual to target the employees so they can go through it and learn. It also did the notes underneath. So it actually used like 11 labs to do the reading and the voice training from a professor. So, and the last part of that was it actually used AI to do the validation, or what's the word that I'm looking for? It's the assessment. So it used the LLMs to actually do the assessment, so somebody can go in and chat
Exams
with the LLM. Exactly. Right. So you don't need all that stuff anymore, right? This LLMs are like, if you bake that. So essentially these guys have reproduced the modern, LMS. It's like you could just upload source material or a book or whatever and say target or build me a 5-module, course for this target audience. And by the way, build me the assessments as well. And by the way, just, create voice. So now this can be consumed in different places. So the content generation world, I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see. Of course, we don't play in that space, in the teaching and learning space. We're mostly around the engagement, but the content generation is an area that we're focusing quite a bit on, around like how to use this to accelerate content generation? Is it going to be, it's going to be really, really interesting to see like how service providers through higher education are going to adopt to the AI wave. Like folks who are building, campaigns, or folks who are building marketing material. And this is kind of, interesting because this is AMA and American Marketing Association for Higher Ed conference that's happening right now. So I don't want to kind of talk about the existential threat to kind of content providers or content generators and agencies, but it's an area where we're looking at it very, very closely, and it's a potential disruptor for a lot of those providers there.
All right, Ardis, I think we are reaching our desired time and attention grabs of all our awesome followers. We've been having a conversation about where we see this incoming government benefiting our AI agendas. Our talking points have been there's probably going to be a replacement to the current AI Act, given that governments tend to do that. We think that this organization is going to be friendly to AI. There's a natural aspect there from efficiency, lower and less government. We also think that MMA, merger and acquisitions, and the funding pipes will allow the AI ecosystem to basically proliferate, more companies, faster innovation, if you will. And we also suspect that there's going to have a connotation of America first, right? And then it's going to be very interesting to see how it touches on software, because we already see how it could look like on the hardware that powers all these AI. And we're excited about that. And for our AI agenda, I think it's going to be a good, interesting observations that we need to do. Any last thoughts as I recapped and kind of gave everybody the summary of what we think we could be observing in the next coming months and years?
Now, for us as technologists, is in a very, very exciting kind of space. I know a lot of folks are in a interesting spot right now as the outcomes of the election. But once not a lot of stuff changes for those of us who work in companies and technology as we move forward. If anything, things are going to accelerate. So it's a very, very exciting time for sure.
Yeah. And as a reminder, this conversation is not a reflection of our excitement or the lack thereof as, our political affiliations is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is really where AI and this administration commingle. And I'm sorry, these texts are coming my way. And how we basically see that it may be a bull market. So thank you, everybody. Exciting times ahead. Until next time, and we'll see you around.
Bye, everybody. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.